Right, it's Remembrance Week, and there's been a lot of remembering, and rightly so, for so many reasons. I've been at Westminster Abbey this week. That was quite a fascinating story to tell. Lizzie, you can't go out. You're still locked in the house.
I am, yeah. I am on day 5.5, not that I'm counting.
Day 5.5 of 14?
Day 5.5 of 14, yeah.
Unless the government changed the rules. Actually, if anyone from the government's watching this, please can you change the rules so that Lizzie can escape from her isolation? If anyone wasn't listening last week, Lizzie was in America helping with our coverage of the US elections. That story's kind of been decided since we last did this podcast, although only decided on one side, not both. However, you are now stuck inside for a couple of weeks. You couldn't join me at Westminster Abbey yesterday. It was beautiful in there. You missed it.
I know. I was directing operations from home, but it was very strange not to be there and to be working from home. But there we go. Those are the rules, and it's to keep everyone safe. So I will continue to do that.
Them are the rules. And it's very much a remembrance episode this week because, as every year, the royal family plays a very significant part in the national remembrance. And there's other reasons why we've been commemorating this week to do with the 100th anniversary of both the unveiling of the Cenotaph on Whitehall and of the grave of the unknown warrior in Westminster Abbey, itself a fascinating tale. And we've got a bit of Jubilee news, a bit of advance news to give you as well, and the ongoing controversy over the BBC's securing of that Princess Diana interview in 1995, and we're talking about it now, 25 years later.
I know. It's amazing, really, that's all come to a head again, and there's a lot of questions being raised and asked about that interview.
Should we do the triple R then? Or no, we could make it a quadruple R this week. Robinson's Remembrance Royal Rundown.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. Okay, so as we've said over the last few weeks, Remembrance Week is a very important time for the royal family, and as anticipated, they were out in force remembering this week. So we had Remembrance Sunday, where they were all at the Cenotaph. The Queen was watching from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office as Prince Charles laid a wreath on her behalf, and other members of the family also laid wreaths. Armistice Day was marked with a ceremony at Westminster Abbey, which also was the marking of the centenary of the burial of the unknown warrior. There was an announcement this week on a visit to Germany that Charles and Camilla will make this weekend to attend the central Remembrance ceremony there. Harry and Meghan marked Remembrance Sunday in their own way, in their own private way, and Harry took part in the Declassified podcast, which also went out on Sunday. In other news, there was a big announcement this morning, Thursday, on plans for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which will be in June 2022. That will be celebrated by the nation. Yes.
Bringing you the news ahead of time.
We really are. And finally, as you said, Martin Bashir and the Panorama interview, lots to discuss there and questions that have come about this week.
A two-part documentary which appeared on ITV this week, in which we heard for the very first time from the graphic designer who says he was asked to mock up those fake bank statements in order to secure the Diana interview. Lots to discuss. I think we should rightfully start on Remembrance, however. Whether we start at the beginning and go forwards, or whether we start at the most recent event, because they're still going on, actually, because you've got Charles and Camilla in Germany at the Bundestag on Sunday. Let's start at the Westminster Abbey, only because I was there yesterday and I can rub in the fact that you weren't. And actually, I was standing right next to, although it's the one grave actually in Westminster Abbey you cannot stand on, the grave of the unknown warrior, but the centenary of the burial of the unknown warrior, I thought was quite something. It really took you back to what it must have been like to be in the UK in 1920, so many grieving mothers and so many grieving widows without a body, without a proper funeral for their loved ones.
Yeah, so the unknown warrior was buried on 11th of November 1920, and that burial represents those who have lost their lives, but their place of death wasn't known, or their bodies remained identified. So that one place was to represent all those people who whose death wasn't known, or bodies remain unidentified. And it's an important symbol of mourning for families even today.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many things we could tell you about this, like how the bodies were chosen in France. They actually exhumed about, historians think, either 4 or 6, and then they were chosen by a brigadier at random. He wasn't to know their name, their rank, the battlefield in which they died, nothing about them at all. So it was all very, very secret. And then the body was brought over by boat and then train, and then to King George V, which was Prince Charles's great grandfather.
Yeah, that's right. And I think if we hadn't have been in COVID times, then the commemorations yesterday, Wednesday, would have been much bigger, but they wanted to mark it in some way. And, the ceremony that they held at the Abbey yesterday, I think there were about 80 people there, which was a significant number, really, but they managed to do it all very carefully choreographed with social distancing.
Yeah.
But that Abbey would have been packed in normal times, and I'm sure we would have seen some sort of procession through London, sort of retracing the steps.
Yeah, I think actually I've been told that was the plan, that the Queen would have retraced her grandfather's steps, King George V's steps, as he walked with the coffin. Do you think we're going to show you some picture? There's so much media here to show you. Here's some black and white images of when King George first laid some flowers on top of the coffin, which was then outside the Cenotaph. The Cenotaph itself, which we all know and has come to symbolise the sort of national focus at this time of year, was unveiled, made of Portland stone. It was only 2 years after the end of the Great War, and previously a wooden structure had existed there. So those black and white images are quite fascinating. Have a look if you're watching on YouTube, or otherwise just head to our social media pages, but have a look at the coffin in the Westminster Abbey. This is in 1920 when it first was positioned in the Abbey. They actually lifted up some flagstones in this particular spot in the Abbey for the first time since the 11th century, which is quite staggering, isn't it? In order to dig the grave. And we spoke to the Dean of Westminster Abbey, who told us about why they used this phrase, this unknown warrior, name and rank unknown, was buried among kings.
It's a wonderful story. An army chaplain, David Railton, sees a grave in France to an unknown soldier. He's determined that the nation will take notice of those who've been lost in that way. He writes to the then Dean of Westminster, Herbert Ryle, who writes to the King, who's initially slightly anxious about this, wonders if this will just open up all the wounds of grief all over again, but quite rapidly realises this is a very good thing to do. The Cabinet backs it. Interestingly, on the day, the Cabinet gave up their places in the Abbey to accommodate more widows. And then the nation pours onto the streets of London on the day, thousands of people. Ryle, the Dean, knew exactly what he was doing. This was all about saying, yes, of course, we have kings and queens and statesmen, poets and others buried in the Abbey, but the Abbey belongs to the nation, it belongs to you. So many people believing this could be their son, their brother. This was the moment when the Abbey really opened its doors to the nation. It became a national gathering place.
And during the service, Charles not only gave a reading, but he also lay a wreath that was a replica of the wreath that was laid by King George V in 19. It was made of roses and bay.
Yes, not basil leaves, as I said on air yesterday. Bay leaves and roses, and that was actually placed at the foot of the grave there. And we mentioned just now, we think the Queen would have retraced her steps. So actually, what she had to do instead, being 94, being a pandemic, being in lockdown, was she visited privately last week. It was just her, the Dean, her equerry, and the Queen's piper that went. Just 4 of them there. And they held their own very private and personal moments. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, here are the pictures. If you're not watching on YouTube, you know where to go. At ITV News Royals on Instagram. And I thought that was quite a moment, wasn't it? The Queen wearing a mask again for the first time.
Yeah, this was a very poignant ceremony, and we're told this was very deeply personal for the Queen to go and mark the centenary of the unknown warrior. And like you say, it's the first time we've seen her wearing a mask, but it's also her first engagement in London since March. And it was, she looked very alone in the middle of that great big Abbey. It was just the four of them, as you say, a very small engagement, and flowers based on her wedding bouquet were laid on the tomb, and that was a tradition that began in 1923 by her mother, the Queen Mother, and royal brides since then have gone on to lay their wedding bouquets on the grave.
It was pretty much every royal bride they said to us, wasn't it? Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was the first to do it because her brother had been killed in the Great War, and then it went on, didn't it? It was the Queen herself laid a bouquet there. I think Princess Margaret did, Princess Anne did, all the way up to most recently Meghan, Eugenie, and Princess Beatrice. Yeah,
it's a tradition that has lasted, and as I said, the Queen did lay a bouquet that was sort of based on her wedding one. On when she visited last week.
Chelsea and Camilla were also wearing masks as well. That picture is on our social media channels if you want to have a look at it. Camilla had the big poppy mask on again. And when Prince Charles gave his speech, here's a tiny clip of his speech, but he also had to wear a mask in order to deliver that speech. He was reading a passage from the Bible. Have a listen.
This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Ye are my friends, if ye do whatsoever I command you. Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth. But I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard of my Father I have made known unto you. Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you, and ordained you, that ye should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever ye shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, that ye love one another. Thanks be to God.
So that was Armistice Day, the 11th of the 11th, and so 100 years earlier, we've just been talking about what happened with King George V. But on Remembrance Sunday, which is always the closest Sunday to Armistice Day, there was the usual ceremony at the Cenotaph, now 100 years old, of course, and the Queen allowed her son, as she has done, what, is it 3 years now or 4, that the Queen's allowed Prince Charles to lay the wreath on her behalf because she watches from the balcony.
Yeah, this is the 4th year. The first time he did it was in 2017. So she watched from the balcony as usual, and she was joined this year on her balcony at a social distance by her lady-in-waiting, Susan Rhodes. And then on the next balcony was, again at a social distance, was the Duchess of Cornwall and the Duchess of Cambridge. And Charles laid a wreath on behalf of his mother, and an equerry laid a wreath on behalf of the Duke of Edinburgh. And so it was a really...
Who wasn't there?
The Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Andrew, Prince Harry,
and the Duchess of Sussex, who were all there last year.
And the Duchess of Sussex. But it was a really, scaled back event. Watching those images, normally Whitehall is absolutely packed, and there are thousands of veterans there. Only 25 veterans marched past the Cenotaph.
Harry and Meghan, there's lots of stories going around about Harry and Meghan. One was he refused to allow to have a wreath laid there. Did he want to lay a wreath? He clearly couldn't come because it's COVID, and he'd have to isolate because he was coming in from America. They then did their own thing at the Los Angeles National Cemetery. What's the truth in all that? Question mark.
I think the truth is that for Prince Harry, we know his military connections are incredibly personal, and Remembrance Week and Remembrance Sunday will mean an awful lot to him. So I think, he will, in his own way, have wanted to mark it, and that's what they did. Whether he was refused permission to have a wreath laid at the Cenotaph, which is what the Sunday Times suggested at the weekend, or whatever he did, I think it's a deeply personal day for Prince Harry.
Yeah, I don't know how he could have laid a wreath, honestly, because A, there's the whole logistics of coming over to the UK, and B, he has, by his own decision, decided to step down as a working member of the royal family, just as Prince Andrew decided himself, although under a lot of pressure, decided to step down as a working member of the royal family. And therefore, neither of them, despite their previous military connections, were at the Cenotaph in order to lay a wreath as they have done in previous years. I think that's probably the right decision, isn't it? I can't see how you would allow Prince Harry there, but not Prince Andrew, although I'm not even remotely comparing, their situation. But the fact is, they have both decided, for whatever reason, very different reasons, we should be clear, to quit as working members of the royal family.
Yeah, I think even if Prince Harry hadn't have been able to go in person, we know he's in America at the moment, I think the suggestion was that he wanted a wreath laid on his behalf at the Cenotaph, but I mean that's what was reported.
So instead of doing that, whether or not he wanted to, they decided instead to go to, I think I worked out it was something like an hour and a half drive from Montecito, where they live, near Santa Barbara, to the Los Angeles National Cemetery, and lay some flowers that they had picked in their garden. Have a look at these pictures. And also Harry placed a wreath next to one of the memorials there. And there were, 3 other pictures that were released by Prince Harry's office. Let's be clear, these weren't pictures that were snapped by paparazzi. They were pictures that were taken by a photographer that Harry and Meghan brought along with them. Let's just be clear. We were contacted by Harry and Meghan's office and said, this is what they did today, and here are some pictures. That's not quite the end of the story, because a lot of people are saying, hold on a minute, I mean, there are 2 questions here, Lizzie. I don't know whether you can answer this. What's the difference between them taking a photographer along and us or the BBC filming members of the royal family in this country, or was it more like a photo shoot and a bit too glossy, or, how do you square this circle?
It's difficult, isn't it? There were a lot of, there's both sides of the argument have played out, whether it's been in the press or whether it's been on social media. So they've been criticised quite heavily for what looks like quite a stylized photo shoot that was taken while they were paying their tributes and respects. But equally, the other side of the argument is, well, photographs are taken of other members of the royal family at engagements. Camilla
was at the Field of Remembrance this week, for example, in Westminster Abbey. A photographer came along and took some pictures. So what is the difference, or isn't there one?
They're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't, really, aren't they? They're criticised whatever they do. But we were told that it was important for them to be able to personally recognise Remembrance in their own way. And this is, we've seen them over recent months try and do things in their own way. And this is another way that they're going to kind of, as they've broken away from the royal family, how they're going to go off on their own.
Yeah, I think the photos, I mean, again, have a look at them again now. Let's replay some of them if you're watching on YouTube. Again, if you're not, you know where to go. They did look quite stylized. They look, I don't know, there was something different about them. And I wonder whether it just looked like, had a member of their team just snapped a couple of shots on their mobile phone and then sent them to us to say, oh, by the way, this happened today. That's different, isn't it, than actually hiring a photographer, bringing them along and taking what looked like some sort of magazine-style photographs.
Yeah, I suppose it comes down to the control they have. If they select a photographer and take that photographer with them and then work with them to choose the photographs, that's very different to having an engagement as a working member of the royal family where you invite members of the press along to take photographs, and the photographs that go out are whatever's been shot.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, who knows what happened, but I'm sure that they carefully selected these 6 pictures, whether it was the office, whether it was Harry and Meghan themselves, we don't know. But nevertheless, I think it wasn't a member of the press that was taking the pictures on behalf of other members of the press. It was a privately hired photographer, and therefore, as you say, there's a different control. But then they're private people, they're not members of the royal family.
And it's the way that they've gone about everything that they've done really since they've been in America. When we get anything from their team now, you get the event has happened, you get a press release and you're given a selection, a handful of pictures. It's not, it doesn't work in the same way as when they were here, when the press would follow them around an event, would pick up whatever story they thought was the story and take photographs and then put that out. It's a different way of doing things. There is a significant amount of control now.
That said, William and Kate this week had a video call. Did we get the entire rushes of the video call, or did we get the clips that Kensington Palace wanted us to have?
Yeah, and we've been getting Zoom calls. We've been given,
what I would call sanitized clips.
Yes, exactly. So
if there was a mistake or a gaffe or something like that, we don't know, because they've edited it out and left it on the, as we used to say in the film world, on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, it's I guess this virtual way of doing things has we have to cover engagements in an entirely different way. It's not the same as being on the ground with them. So
of that Zoom call then that they made, William made some calls to some members of the armed forces serving overseas. I think there was a boat or a ship, I think you're meant to call them in the Royal Navy. HMS, what was your name? HMS Monroe's, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah,
he had a bit of a joke, didn't he, with one of the PT, personal training instructors.
Yeah, I'll just let us play it because it's quite a funny conversation.
I remember being beasted by people like you, Damon, on the Iron Duke. The on deck PT was always quite a fun afternoon.
It's one of them things that has to happen, I'm afraid.
I think after a number of lockdowns, Damon, I might need your PT skills to help me get back into shape again.
Anyway, Kate's video call, however, was very serious, wasn't it? Because she was talking to people who had lost loved ones in the course of military service.
Yeah, she spoke to 3 families who'd lost loved ones and heard how they've been supported by the Royal British Legion. And in the course of the conversation, one of the families she spoke to, there was an 11-year-old boy who was wearing his father's medals, and they had a really lovely exchange.
Are those your daddy's medals?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And where they kept very safely at home?
Yes.
Oh, well, it's very special you're wearing them today. Would you like to tell me a little bit about your father, Charlton, or Sonia, about your husband?
I think Mum would explain it best, since I don't really remember much. You take the floor, Mum.
So Charlton was 10 months. I've got 2 older boys. They were 13 and 11 when Michael died. Probably the hardest thing is doing it on your own, because you have all these ideas and things about what you want to do with the boys, whether you're making the right decision and that. And I think reflecting on that is really hard. Just to see if you're doing the right decisions and, if you're guiding them down the right path. And, luckily for me, all 3 are quite grounded, and all of them have got bits of dad in them. Even Charlie.
Before we wrap up on Remembrance Week, I think we should look ahead to what Charles and Camilla are doing this weekend, and that is they're the first royals ever to be invited to Germany for their central remembrance service on what the Germans call their national day of mourning. They don't have Armistice Day in the same way, obviously, because the Armistice Day relates to the victory of the Allied forces over Germany in 1918. However, lives were lost in Germany, and they mark those lives lost in what's called a National Day of Mourning. And Charles and Camilla will be speaking at the Bundestag, the German Parliament. Yeah,
this is very significant. They'll be as you say, the first royals to have attended, the first British royals to have attended the central remembrance ceremony. While they're there, they'll also attend a wreath laying. And this is, they're going at the request of the British government after the President of Germany extended an invitation, and it's going ahead despite COVID and despite the restrictions. They're able to travel under diplomatic guidelines. They will have to be tested before they travel, but they can travel.
That was news to me. But then I think when you think about the Brexit negotiations that are going on at the moment, and our team go over to Brussels, and the Brussels team comes over here, but then there is an example of diplomatic exemptions from the COVID travel restrictions, and that will also apply to Charles and Camilla. It doesn't, however, apply to the press, and none of us can really go unless we want to do what you're currently doing, spend another 2 weeks at home.
Yeah, no, I'm out anyway. I wouldn't have been able to go.
Right,
but
you can't go.
You went,
but I would have been out of action. So I don't think there'll be that many members of the press, to be brutally honest, on this trip. But they're going on the Voyager, the RAF Voyager, which has had that respray since it was last used. Rather than the military grey, it's now in the sort of red, white and blue of the Union flag. So it should be quite an interesting trip. We'll bring you we'll tell you what happened in next week's podcast. Should we have a massive change of gear now and talk about events from 25 years ago?
Let's have a change of gear.
So, where do you start with this one? We all remember, well, why don't we play you a bit just to refresh your memory, what Diana said when she spoke on the BBC's Panorama in 1995.
There's no better way to dismantle a personality than to isolate it.
So you were isolated?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Do you think you'll ever be Queen?
No, I don't. No.
Why do you think that?
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts. But I don't see myself being queen of this country. I don't think many people would want me to be queen. Actually, when I say many people, I mean the establishment that I'm married into, because they've decided that I'm a non-starter.
So we all remember Queen of Hearts. We all remember there were 3 of us in this marriage. We all remember what was quite a significant interview that went on to lead to the divorce of Charles and Diana when the Queen said she'd had enough. What we're talking about here is what the journalist Martin Bashir did in order to secure that interview with Princess Diana. Lots of new revelations. ITV had a documentary this week in which a graphic designer spoke for the first time. It's a tough story, this, but it's not left the BBC and Martin Bashir in a particularly good place.
No, and there have been questions before about how Martin Bashir secured this huge scoop at the time, but these questions, as you say, have all come to the fore again. And one of the people driving the questions and the calls for an inquiry is Charles Spencer, Diana's brother, and he tweeted this week to say, while he knew Martin Bashir used fake bank statements and other dishonesty to get my sister to do the interview, what I found out 2 weeks ago is that the BBC also knew not only about it, but covered it up.
And that's why people are saying, why has this come to light 25 years later? Well, there's been some freedom of information requests put in, and Charles Spencer says he's only recently found out that the BBC knew about these fake bank statements. So how do we explain these fake bank statements? So they were used by Martin Bashir to show Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, in order to facilitate a meeting with Diana. Basically, what Martin Bashir was trying to do was to meet Diana to say, will you do an interview with me? He used Diana's brother as the, gatekeeper, as a conduit. And these bank statements were made up by a graphic designer who was working for the BBC Panorama programme at the time. This is what he told the ITV documentary this week of what he was asked by Martin Bashir to do.
I got home from work and I got a phone call from Martin Bashir, and he wanted me to do a favour for him, and it was really urgent and really important. Martin asked me to make up a couple of bank statements that he needed the following day. And he did say that they were just going to be used as copies. So on that night, I was just making some props for filming purposes. In almost a naive way, I thought when you worked for the BBC, you were working for the greater good of everything. After this episode, almost all of that fell away. And I thought, what it is really about is senior management and senior producers and presenters protecting themselves at all cost. And I quite clearly felt that I was the one that was going to be the fall guy in this story.
That was Matt Wiesler. Now this is the first time, by the way, he's spoken on camera in 25 years. And clearly he said also in that interview that he feels like he's become the fall guy for this. And the BBC tried to, use him as the fall guy so to avoid taking blame themselves.
That's right. And he said, as you heard in the clip, that why he's coming forward now is that he wants to essentially clear his name and not be, he's had to live with this for 25 years with him taking the blame essentially. And he too wants to see an apology.
Yeah, exactly. And the BBC, interestingly, they were, saying that they would look into this and that they couldn't speak to Martin Bashir because he's currently signed off work on medical grounds because he had a heart operation and then he had complications caused by coronavirus. But then some photographers outside his house photographed him apparently buying a takeaway, which it led some people to question, well, if you can buy a takeaway, why can't you speak to your bosses about what happens in 1995?
Yeah, we've had no statement. We've had various statements from the BBC, but nothing from Martin Bashir himself, because as you say, we're being told that he is too unwell to be able to talk to us.
So let's just read you the BBC statement in fairness. This comes from Tim Davie, who is the new Director General of the BBC. He says, the BBC is taking this very seriously and we want to get to the truth. We are in the process of commissioning a robust and independent investigation. Full stop, close quotes. So they said they're setting up another, what they call independent and robust investigation to look into these claims. Diana's good friend, though, Rosa Monckton, Lizzie, didn't she spoke to Good Morning Britain this week, and she thinks that Martin Bashir should be sort of hauled into the bosses and told to explain himself, to use her words.
She did. She was very strong. She spoke to Good Morning Britain this week, and should we play you a clip?
I think that Bashir he behaved like the worst sort of paparazzi. He was ruthless, he was predatory, and he was calculating. And I think what people tend to forget, people who say that she would have done an interview anyway, she did not approach Bashir. He snared her in. And I think that's a very important point for people to remember.
So Rosa Monckton was making some pretty serious allegations there, saying Martin Bashir and the BBC were just as bad as any tabloid photographer who was hounding Diana at the time. Now, we must be clear, we don't know the full circumstances. We have these allegations that have been made. We haven't yet heard from Martin Bashir himself. We've read you the statement from the BBC. Nevertheless, the story's not going away.
The story is not going away. It has it's sort of snowballed all week. And, Charles Spencer has made, I think there was 32, he kept notes of 32 times when Martin Bashir made claims to try and help secure the interview with Diana, and he's kept very thorough notes which he's shared. So yes, it feels like this story is going to roll on.
And among those claims, it should be clear they're the allegations, but let's just tell you what they are. It is that not only that these bank statements were used to show that Charles Spencer's head of security was apparently being paid by a newspaper to leak stories about Diana, that another bank statement was used to suggest that he was getting some offshore payments, in other words, to lead Charles Spencer to believe that his head of security was being paid by the secret services to spy on Diana. And that same allegation apparently was also used about two of Diana's, or two members of the household, Diana's private secretary, Patrick Jeffson, and Prince Charles's private secretary, Richard Aylard, that they were being paid by MI5 or MI6 in order to spy on Diana. You know, we don't know the truth of all this. This is what Earl Spencer claims. Nevertheless, you know, they're serious allegations, and you know, they kind of played into the paranoia that Diana had. We know that Diana sort of feared about these things. What else did he claim? That William had something on his watch that was recording conversations. Now, you know, these allegations, but they kind of were playing on the paranoia of Princess Diana, who believed that this kind of stuff might be happening in any case.
That's right. And Rosa Monckton, who we've mentioned before, Diana's close friend, has said previously that she felt that there was a change in Diana, and that change, she said, that when she looked back at the timeline, that change in Diana seemed to come at a similar time to when they started the conversations with Martin Bashir.
Yeah, and actually one of the reasons they think that the previous BBC investigation in 1996 wasn't sort of, you know, completed was that even the palace at that time were just quite happy for the whole thing to go away. Such was the terrible PR around Charles and Diana. You know, they didn't really want the BBC to continue investigating because, I imagine, this is claimed some of the reports this week, because they kind of wanted it to go away, and you can see why that they just wouldn't want this rumbling on and on and on. However, it now is a quarter of a century later, and some big questions over the ethics of the BBC's journalism at the time. So we'll update you on that one next week if there's any more to tell you about that. I suppose we should end by looking ahead, by giving you the most advanced news I think we've ever given you on this podcast, that in 18 months' time, or thereabouts, you're going to get an extra long bank holiday weekend.
Yes, a 4-day bank holiday weekend in June 2022 to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And we are being promised a special 4-day Jubilee weekend when we will put on a spectacular once-in-a-generation show. So there we go. That's from the Culture Secretary.
So I can't quite work out why they told us this now. I mean, obviously you need to tell companies in advance they can plan bank holidays and things, but now, I mean, I just couldn't quite work out why we were being told this so far in advance. I know, for example, there is an office in Buckingham Palace where they are planning the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. So, you know, the work is underway, and we should point out we've never had a Platinum Jubilee before. You know, we've had, you know, the Queen's had a golden, but so did Queen Victoria, but this is the first time that any British monarch has reached, or will have reached, or we hope she will have reached, choose my words carefully, 70 years on the throne.
Yeah, it'll be 70 years on the throne on the 6th of February 2022, and as you say, that'll be the first time a monarch has reached their Platinum Jubilee, and the focal point of the sessions will be that first weekend in June, and there will be huge not only in London but across the UK and across the Commonwealth, so it will feel like a really big celebration. You know, we're being promised an absolute blockbuster weekend of events.
Now, I was having a Twitter conversation this morning about with one of our colleagues, Russell Meyer at the Daily Mirror, about these claims that the Queen was going to stand down when she was 95, which is next April. And have a regency. I mean, whether you believe those claims or not, it's still possible that you could have a Platinum Jubilee, because if we had a regency, the Queen would still be the Queen. She'd still be the head of state. She'll hand all of her power to Prince Charles. But nominally, just like George III in the, whatever it was, early 1800s, he was the king, but his son, the Prince Regent, ran the show. So am I right in saying, do you think I'm right in saying that you could still have a Platinum Jubilee even if we had a regency? Question mark.
You could. You could, probably.
Yeah. But you took it to me, actually the Queen's going to go on and on and on.
It doesn't feel like things are about to change, does it?
Right, no, it doesn't. I just thought that was an interesting point. I think it was in Robert Jobson's book, wasn't it, when he wrote, Robert Johnson, one of our colleagues who works for the Evening Standard, he wrote that there was going to be a handover of power, a regency when the Queen gets to 95. And we're not that far away from that now, so we're going to find out whether or not it's true. Maybe she'll do it at the end of the Platinum Jubilee. Maybe that's when she does it. Maybe that's why we've got this bank holiday weekend, so we can have a whole transition to a regency.
Goodness me, I think getting carried away. I think let's hope though that the weather is a little bit better for this Jubilee than the last one. Do you remember the river pageant they had for the last one where it was absolutely pouring?
Everyone remembers the river pageant when the weather was really, really bad, yes.
It did. And then there was the big concert, they had the big RAF fly past, there was a service of Thanksgiving, so that was a real spectacle. So they've got some way to go to top that.
They have actually, yeah, and they've got a lot of work to do between now and then, but at least we know that it's happening in June 2022.
Yeah, and they're saying that further details on the programming, details of the events, how members of the public can get involved, those will all be announced sort of over the coming months. So there will be ways for people to get involved. And they're also going to create there's a medal, what's it called? The Jubilee Medal, and that'll be created and awarded to public service workers.
There we are. Okay, so a lot of work for them to do, but actually we know what the royal family can turn around in a short space of time. When did Harry and Meghan announce their engagement? It was something like November, and they got married in May. So we know what they can turn around in 6 months. So they've got 18 months here to turn something around. I'm sure they will manage it very well. Can't tell you about anything next week apart from Germany.
Germany, and that's.
Told you about that already.
That's all we can look at.
Yeah. Right.
And
Okay.
we've spoken about 2022, so. We can't get much further ahead than that.
No, exactly. You were going to ask me whether I knew about how many times the Queen has missed the Cenotaph.
Oh yes, well, one of the reasons that we know, I mean, the Cenotaph is so hugely important to the Queen. It's one of the unmissable dates in her diary, and she's only missed the event 6 times in her reign. Do you know when?
I imagine she probably missed it in 1948 when she gave birth to Prince Charles, because he was born on the 14th of November. But she wasn't the Queen then, so I'm just imagining she didn't go. How about the births of Andrew and Edward?
Yeah, there are 2, Andrew and Edward.
Okay.
She wasn't there.
How many are there in total?
6.
6, blimey. So I've got 4 more to go. Was she on tour somewhere for something?
Yes.
The big thing when she went on the boat around the world.
The big thing when she went on the boat. There was 1968 when she was in Brazil, 1983 when she was in Kenya, 1991 when she was in Ghana, and 1999 when she was in South Africa.
Okay, so 4 world trips. I kind of got them. Big trips around the world, plus
big trip, plus 2 children,
younger children. Yeah. Fine.
Yeah.
And she really doesn't. I mean, we should be clear. She doesn't miss them anymore. She just doesn't do that. The laying of the wreath. And actually, I was watching. I think it was when Lord Fowler, who's the Speaker of the House of Lords, laid his wreath and stepped back. He's an elderly gent. You can kind of see why the Queen doesn't do that anymore, because it is a very tricky operation to navigate, is to lay the wreath and then walk backwards down those steps. And then many people say, the Queen at 94, it's about time that she didn't have to do that anymore. So instead her 72-year-old son does it. But he will be 72 on Saturday, won't he? Oh, there's an event we can take. There is a birthday coming up.
There is a birthday. But it was it was a really significant moment, that, wasn't it? In November 2017, when he first did it, it felt like he was taking on more of the role and responsibilities of his mother.
It was like a look into the future, wasn't it? About this is what it would like if he were to be the king. Anyway, so we've told you about 2 things coming up next week, which is more than we can normally tell you on this podcast. Thank you again for watching. Any suggestions that you want us to talk about, cover, and all the rest of it, just stick it on social media, #Royal Rota ITV, either on Twitter or on Instagram. I seem to be on them constantly in my life.
Yes, so I definitely am. Now I'm in lockdown.
Yes, exactly. You've got nothing else to do. Right. We'll see you next week. Are you out of lockdown next week? You're still in it?
No, it's still in. I'll still be in next week. But the following week, we'll have to do one in the studio because I'll be out.
Right. Thanks for watching. See you next week.